Hello, MedTech Insight enthusiasts. This is Dr. Jennifer Joe with my co-host, the fabulous Dr. Ami Bhatt. When Dr. Bhatt isn't hosting the show, she's running the Massachusetts General Hospital telecardiology program, which is where she's streaming from now, seeing congenital heart disease patients, and teaching at the Harvard Medical School. When I'm not hosting the show, I see patients in the emergency room, urgent care, and hospitalist setting. We both support a number of traditional medtech and up-and-coming digital health startups. We both believe that healthcare can be better, both for the clinician and for the patients. You can find both of us giving local, national, and international talks regularly, and you should look for our Springer first ever textbook on digital health to be published very soon. And I think, we have some of those authors joining us today as well. Is that right?
We do. They're authors as part of the book.
Oh, very exciting. Yeah. MedTech Insights is a live weekly interactive talk show led by me and Ami, where we interview two guest leaders in digital health every Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. You can watch us live every Tuesday through the MedTech Insights Facebook page, either Ami or my personal Facebook page, the Vanguard.Health YouTube page, or through my personal LinkedIn page. When you tune in live and write comments in any of these places, we will try to feature your questions on the show and also incorporate your questions to our guests. We love comments, so please leave them. Please tell us who you are, where you're watching from, and what you're interested in. As a reminder, all shows are recorded and available after the fact at our website, Vanguard.Health/MedTech Insights. And be sure to keep up with the show by joining our mailing list and look for us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
So excited to have everybody with us today. Beautiful, pretty steady summer weather. Spring lasted for all of, maybe 3 weeks in Boston, but we're enjoying it here. Today, we're going to do a deep dive. We're going to do all telemedicine all the time. We will touch on digital health. We will touch on peripherals and starting to think a little bit about what does telemedicine mean beyond just having video chats with your doctor. And we're going to do that with two colleagues who I have known for a while now through the American Telemedicine Association. They've also worked with us on the upcoming Springer book, which I think is ready to launch in September. We'll get confirmation soon. And are just really amazing people to work with. So I'll start with introducing the first one. We'll bring Andrew on for a little bit, and then we'll have Nick join. Dr. Andrew Watson is a 4th-generation surgeon and 8th-generation surgeon in his family. 8th surgeon in his family. He earned his master's degree at the University of Oxford and attended medical school at Columbia Medical School. He did his surgical training then and his fellowship at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. That is where I graduated from high school. Had a great time there and in Fox Chapel. Andrew is now an actively practicing colorectal surgeon. He specializes in minimally invasive inflammatory bowel disease surgery, and he uses and helps develop telemedicine at UPMC with a focus on remote patient monitoring. He himself has done about 650 virtual consults, including preoperative, postoperative, but also telerounding, tele-ICU care, and intraoperative care. So really has done the whole gamut of how can we use telemedicine. He blends his career working for UPMC International, Insurance Services and Health Services divisions, really understanding that in order to transform healthcare, one has to have a vision that incorporates all these different aspects of the delivery system. And he is the past president of the American Telemedicine Association and an advisor to the American Board of Telehealth. He is a founder of my very favorite Twitter chat, #TelemedNow. That is Wednesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern, and we have a lot of fun talking telemedicine. So please do follow him on Twitter, follow him on LinkedIn. Dr. Andrew Watson joining us today.
Thank you, Ami, very much. It's a real pleasure to be here, and both to you and Dr. Joe. It's impressive all that you're doing here and helping to get the good word out about telemedicine.
Oh, we're excited to have you today. This is fantastic. So Andrew, everybody in the audience is listening and thinking, we have talked about telemedicine, digital health, but we've talked about it a lot in terms of remote patient monitoring, in terms of behavioral health, primary care, even pediatrics, but surgery, really? I think that's a question that's out there in the audience. So will you tell us how a surgeon maybe ended up in telemedicine first, and then we can dive into where telemedicine is headed today?
Well, it was sort of a random chance and a good question. My brother was a .comer, and in our conversations over dinner, he convinced me there has to be a better way to do healthcare than everybody traveling to the hospital. And in one of my family conversations, I learned that my great-great-grandfather was the Mayo brothers' first partner. It used to be Mayo, and Stinchfield, and his plaque from his doors right behind me in that very neat desk. And the reason why the Mayo brothers hired him is because he went to the homes. And my father and my grandfather and my great-grandfather and one of my cousins and my great-uncle all did home calls. And I wanted to be like them and do home calls. And so this combination of digital and making home calls all came together. And somehow that ended up where I am today with telemedicine. And I just love it. Thank you.
Oh, so that we talk a lot about this, Dr. Joe and I, the origin story, right? How did people's experience bring them here? And this idea that there are 8 surgeons in your family, other doctors, and people making home calls. And that's what we want to get back to. And I love that message because a lot of people are afraid that telemedicine, digital health is actually putting technology in between us and our patients. And I think those of us who do this, and those of us like you, Andrew, who do it across many different spectra, understand that actually it does bring us closer to our patients. And that's something that we can achieve. And so I think that's a message that really needs to get across. So when you're doing your regular practice, Dr. Watson, will you tell us just a little bit about where did you start? Did you start with, I'm just going to do some pre-op, post-op? Did you start it all at once for those surgeons who are out there listening as well? How does one...
And can we backtrack this a little bit?
Yeah,
I feel like Dr. Watson's been doing this for a very long time, and I'm not sure how long. Are you like the father of telemedicine? Are you the grandfather of telemedicine? Are you the great-great-grandfather of telemedicine?
Yeah, I'm not that old, am I?
You've been doing it.
Now he's getting sensitive about going gray. So.
Building on one of Ami's points, that I had a patient come and see me from an hour and a half away, and she gave me a hug. And a typical surgical patient, how are you? How's your wound look? Are you eating, passing gas? How do you feel? And she goes, Doc, my house abuts one of your hospitals an hour and a half away. I drove 3 hours just to hear this. And I was like, got it. And I talked to a patient last Thursday, and just a lovely patient. And it's an hour-long drive, but it takes him 2 hours each way because he spends an hour in the bathrooms on his way here. And I think that in the world of healthcare, people tend to say no, which I can understand. It's cultural change, but we don't understand. We talk a lot about side effects of medications and surgeries and other procedures. I think one of the greatest risks and side effects of healthcare is travel. And when you're sick and you don't feel well, you don't want to get in a car and find the potholes. You want to sit on your couch. And so telemedicine gives us access like never before to patients where they want to be at home. And it's not for everybody, absolutely, but it's really bringing the humanity back to care where it really should be. And we're learning a lot about patients in their home environment, what they're thinking, what their homes look like, and what they want. They're much more relaxed. And Ami, with hypertension, they get white coat syndrome coming to our clinics. And it takes experts like my colleague, Nate Lacktman here today, and a lot of others to really help us understand this. But I always tell people this is just a natural evolution of healthcare in a digital era, and patients love it. And if you don't believe me, come to my clinic. Come see some folks with me.
That's exactly what, the way you talk about that really makes sense, because what Dr. Watson is referring to is we really otherwise bring patients to us and we say, but we are the Mecca. We are the central place. We are where the healthcare providers are. And if we're asking patients to feel empowered, if we're asking patients to be a partner with us in that care, then part of that is respecting your partner and saying, because I know this is going to be a difficult commute for you, because I know that you need to be at home, either for healthcare reasons or for other life reasons. If this is a 15-minute conversation that doesn't need to happen face-to-face, if this doesn't require an exam at this exact time, then there's no reason that I can't come to you. There are practices that say it's just easier for us to go all the way back to having no telemedicine now. There are many practices throughout the country and the world that are saying, we're just going to go back. And that is where people like Dr. Watson and others who are taking the charge at ATA through Telemed now and saying, no, hold on a second. Because that's not right. It's not the humane thing to do. It's not the right thing to do for patients. There are times where it is better if we allow patients to really be our partner and respect them like that. So I love that. This is probably a good time for me to say, since I didn't do the caveat before, both of our guests and Dr. Joe and I are all speaking of our own opinions, and these do not represent the opinions of any of the institutions we work with or collaborate with.
And I'd also like to interject right now, just to say thank you to the audience for watching. We have Lacey Richson. Thank you, Lacey, for Richson. She's a registered nurse in Indianapolis, Indiana. Really appreciate all the good work that you do. And then we have Jayanthi Narasihan, CEO of WatchRx. Thanks, Jayanthi, for watching, like you always do. Sorry. Back to
that's perfect. So actually, let's take those two guests and think about that together, maybe while we have you, Dr. Watson. Role of having nursing, having social work, having other people interact in telemedicine. Would love your thoughts on that. We talk about physicians quite a bit, and then maybe after that we can dive into peripherals a little bit too.
Sure. One thing about telemedicine is that the way healthcare is set up now, it's face-to-face visits driving to a clinic. And telemedicine has a number of different components. There's the remote monitoring part, there's the store and forward part, and the video visits. So there's 3 different parts to it. And we tend to always think telemedicine is just these video visits. But there's a lot that we can do with remote monitoring, the store and forward technologies, to have nurses and social workers help to take care of patients, and especially in the behavioral health realm as well. I'm actually, right now, we've got an overlapping meeting with our inflammatory bowel disease medical home at UPMC, run by Eva Segathy. And this is a multidisciplinary team of GI, psych, social work, nutrition, surgery, and we all come together and help to take care of these patients using telemedicine. So it's really important to understand that all aspects of healthcare providers can use telemedicine. And it really brings these teams together. And one of the other points that you and Jen were alluding to is that you don't have to have these rigorous face-to-face visits every 6 months or a year or 3 months. You can do short touch and tune in between these visits, which gives you unparalleled abilities to reach patients more efficiently and truly get into long-term care. We do not understand long-term care fully until telemedicine is deployed. And no medical home can scale without telemedicine. It's economically impossible. So it's very promising, and that's why what you do here with this live stream, and also the work that Nate does, is so important, and also our work on Twitter to get the word out. But it's so much potential. I think we're very, very early in the process still.
Oh, look at that. Nicole has comments. And Nicole says, how are you going to sell telemedicine to C-suite executives who have made extensive investments in buildings and properties throughout health systems? That is a great question, Nicole. Andrew, you can answer this.
And there's 2 different areas you're looking at. You're looking at the payer and the provider side. The provider side, as we know, are now entering risk arrangements. And we tend to focus on telemedicine again is a video visit. Telemedicine is not just a video visit, the monitoring the video in the store and forward. And so when you think about it, the C-suite already gets it, because all of radiology, most of pathology, a fair amount of dermatology, and ophthalmology is all done through telemedicine. Look at cardiology, what Ami does with EKGs, echoes. So telemedicine's all around, folks. In terms of video visits per se, yes, you have a lot of fixed costs, and you have the total cost of ownership of properties. But what people are learning now, you can actually shut down units, or you can reallocate resources in this world. And that's the hard part. As a surgeon, yes, will it slow me down? Maybe, yes. And a big part of this too is understanding risk arrangements. If you look at United, our own internal model, but Intermountain does too, as you put providers and hospitals at risk, you'll see other forms of telemedicine fill in, like monitoring and store and forward. So it really depends on how all this is set up. And I think the C-suite on the provider side is beginning to understand it more and more. On the payer side, that's a separate question. But the C-suite of the provider side is getting used to this. And certainly at COVID, it was the only way to get used to it.
That's, the question, Nicole, is excellent, because we do think about that latter part that you said, investments in buildings and properties, right? And we've spent a long time kind of collaborating with, oftentimes purchasing, building new things in the community, urgent care centers. And now you say, if a lot of this is going to become virtual, what do we do with the overhead? What do we do with the property? So the good news is reallocation is actually very useful. If you look at, and I'm not going to pick on surgeons, but OR turnaround times, right? Boy, we sure are working on efficiency and how many we can get through. But while we're working on it, we're not perfect yet. If there were opportunities to turn things into increased procedural areas, especially if you're looking at, now the challenge is you'd say, Dr. Bhatt, you're telling me that a clinic can become an OR. That's so far-fetched, right? But can a clinic space become a mini procedural area where things that may not require the same kind of things that an OR requires could be transitioned, and then those could be taken out of the OR, for example, for more complex surgeries. And so I think there is a lot of thinking that needs to go on, and this is where you can't really do it with just your own group. This is where telemedicine, especially at the larger institution, needs to happen at a higher level where we can take a look at everyone and say, these people's OR needs are greater, these people's procedural needs are greater. How are we going to make this happen? I also think access is an incredible issue right now for us. So just getting in to see a primary care doctor, to see a cardiologist, the surgeons actually do better than we are in primary care or cardiology. But the number of people who are waiting just to get healthcare and to get longitudinal healthcare. I'm not talking about just get like a look at me one time, tell me something, move me. That need chronic care is immense, and we have a real access delay in this country. That access delay actually unfairly impacts some of our lower SES in specific races and ethnicities. So having more available clinic space, because those who can get care from home or should get care from home do it, really does open up those offices for increased volume. So my argument to the C-suite is always, we've gone from 66 to 74,000 visits because you've allowed us to do virtual. We've gotten more new patients in, we've gotten them faster, and downstream they're ideally less sick because we get to them in a timely manner. And so I think all of that comes into thinking about the C-suite. But this is, stuff that I've learned from Dr. Watson as well. This might be a great time to bring in Nate Lacktman. So let me introduce him. Nate is a partner and he is chair of Foley and Lardner's telemedicine and digital health industry team. His team was named the premier law firm for telehealth counsel by Chambers USA just recently. He advises entrepreneurial technology-enabled healthcare companies on business arrangements, compliance, and corporate matters. His practice emphasizes strategic counseling, creative business modeling, like we're talking about right now, and fresh approaches to realize the client's ambitions and kind of innovative goals. He can also be followed. He has a telehealth law on Twitter, and that is at Lacktman, Lacktman. And he really does post some insightful articles, as well as he's been just very helpful when people have small questions about what's going on themselves. To really have someone who's experienced in telehealth law, it seems rare nowadays. And so we're so excited to have somebody who's so accessible as well. So Nate Lacktman joining us now. Excited to have you with us, Nate.
Yes, thank you for having me, Ami, Jen. I really appreciate the time here.
So, just to get everybody on the same page about who you are and how you got to this, you went to law school, you started doing this, and then long before other people started thinking about telemedicine, you were there in the telehealth space. So will you tell us how you found your way here?
Yeah, sure. I've been practicing law for over 16 years, all healthcare law, and I got into virtual care telemedicine issues about 8 years ago. It's all I do, 100%. We have a team of about 26 people, the core 10, 15, that's all they do is work with telemedicine, virtual care companies, or hospitals and AMCs on virtual care issues. My introduction into telemedicine, like I said, I did a lot of fraud and abuse, compliance, overpayments, all operations, the traditional healthcare stuff. And I thought it was great. It's complicated. I'm not scientific enough to go to med school, but I felt value of helping the healthcare system more than just pushing around other people's money in like a litigation manner. But what I wanted to do really was help build things. And I looked at it from an entrepreneurial perspective. There was a gap in the marketplace. There weren't folks really doing a proper 50-state assessment of all of these barriers to entry, like you may say as an entrepreneur, and figuring out solutions, turnkey solutions. So companies, people who have really cool ideas, who say, hey, I know this is how healthcare is done right now, but why? Right? Why do we have to do it this way? There are new and better and different ways using technology to deliver healthcare services. And there was a gap. And so I said, let's just strap in, buckle down, read the laws of all 50 states, corporate laws, medical practice laws, telemedicine laws, referrals, e-commerce, fraud and abuse, and come up with these models and solutions. And as a result, we've been able to work with literally hundreds of startup companies and AMCs to help them build and scale models to deliver healthcare virtually across multiple geographies using homogeneous service models that are low cost and operating expense, which is particularly important when maybe 5-6 years ago, when reimbursement was very spotty and unclear, the financial ROI really needed to be justified. So these models had to be lean, elegant, and scalable. So that's what I find rewarding, is basically working with people and helping a little bit to make their ideas manifest in reality.
It's fantastic, Nate. So as we look forward, a little bit to the future, you say that you did this pre-COVID, and there is this concern that we are rapidly, as waivers kind of expire during COVID, headed back towards that pre-COVID state. Do you see any promising laws that are changing how we're doing things? Do you think that we need to go back to your pre-COVID model and everybody needs to kind of get on board? Where is the future of telehealth law? Are we going to successfully take any waivers and make them stick, or how are we headed? I know it's a tough question, but I figure if there's someone to ask, it's you, Nate.
Well, it's a great question. It's a broad question, right? And it goes hand in hand is what is the future of medicine in the United States, at least? I think there's no question that virtual is going to play an important part. I don't think that everything is going to be virtual only. There is a role for in-person care, just like there's a role for virtual care. It's an exciting period of time if you're a clinician or an administrator operator to figure out what fits best for your particular organization strategy and your patient population. Some of the waivers will go away. We're not going to have all the payment waivers. Those won't be permanent. I think it's very unlikely. Some of them already are permanent. The licensure waivers are very likely to go away. I don't have a high degree of hope there's going to be a single national license. So that I think the DEA prescribing stuff, that is more likely than not to become some sort of permanent feature, allowing controlled substance prescribing via telemedicine without in-person exam. So at its heart, though, COVID did not create the telemedicine industry. It merely helped accelerate what was already occurring and inevitable. And if we look to other industries and how they have evolved through basically e-commerce channels, nobody is saying, let's go. I'm worried that we're going to go back to like in-person banking and tellers, right? Or finance. These are important transactions for people's lives, financial or otherwise. People buy mattresses, shoes, products that it would be unheard of to purchase without touching and feeling very comfortably online. And I think medicine is going in that same direction, and it will continue to do so. Probably one of the bigger change factors that has both helped the growth of innovative telemedicine entrepreneurs and will change how traditional institutions view it is retail medicine, right? These startups who are cash only, who say we can deliver care for less than what your copay is through an insurance company. And I think what that does is it casts a light on how bloated and how much excess administrative cost is baked into our healthcare industry. It's 18% of our GDP, doesn't need to be, and how little of it actually flows down to direct frontline caregivers. And so I think that some of the traditional providers are going to draw on lessons learned from the retail medicine cadre, apply that, and hopefully we'll have actually better, less expensive care.
That's great. So maybe a question for both of you. Jen, if there are questions coming in from the audience.
There are questions coming in from the audience.
Why don't we do those first?
Yes, I see you do not read the private chat whatsoever, but everyone else does. Okay.
Oh, look, you read up the private chat. Thank you, Jen.
So we have some really great questions from the audience. Lacey Rishan says, do you think you're able to see more patients daily by using telehealth as a provider? And what is your opinion on assessments via telehealth? I think that's a really wonderful question. And we have so many practicing telemedicine providers here. Do we want to start with Dr. Watson?
Yep, Dr. Watson.
Yeah, sure. And thank you, Lacey, for a great question. And it's interesting, and Ami and I and Nate have discussed this a lot in our Telemed Now tweet chat as well. The important part is that the telemedicine examination is just a new type of examination. And when you think back on it, I started doing laparoscopic colectomies in 2003, and we were using large sticks and staplers and video cameras to do surgery. We're no longer touching the patients. And it was heresy, evil, witchcraft, and bad for the patients. Now it's the standard of care. I did 3 colectomies in the last month. Each incision was about 1.5 inches to 2 inches below their underwear line. In the past, we had an incision from top to bottom. I can't tell you the morbidity of that and the side effects, hernias, wound infections, stoma problems. And so telemedicine is much like the same. You just have to learn a new way to do an examination, and it's not for everybody. And it might be for 80 or 90%. It's just like when Ami learned how to do TAVRs or those types of procedures. You could do valves and wire them through the groins instead of open heart surgery. And so it's different. And we as a community need to embrace that and learn how to do this. And people like Judd Hollander and Aditya Joshi at Jefferson have done a lot of great work, and they join our chat as well. And you can see more patients because there's less no-shows we're seeing with telemedicine. It's not really the point, but I would say the no-show rate does go down. And it's just, operationally, it's just a bit cleaner, it's quicker.
When you look at the actual number of patients you see, there are days where I have the same number either virtually or in person because there can be complex patients who I'm seeing. What I will tell you is those 30 minutes are entirely dedicated to that patient. It's not 10 minutes of rooming and then finding your way and then the other room. And so, whereas a 30-minute visit with your doctor in a clinic may actually be closer to 15 minutes of face-to-face time, on virtual, it really is 30 minutes. And then there are others who just need a blood pressure check. And for those, you can really check in, check the meds, see what's happening, kind of move on. There can be quicker. So sometimes it's more volume within a given clinic. Other times it's not, but it's probably more quality time. In an examining, the heart exam, you could say that I probably have the shortest end of the stick, if you will, because I'm not going to be able to hear your heart. There are digital stethoscope companies streaming ultrasound. We do have, watches and monitors and remote monitoring and implantable monitors. So we have a lot of ways to get to people. But what I do find is if you ever do the exam and you find that the laying on of hands would significantly change the course of that patient's disease process management, you can always bring them in. That happens less than 20% of the time where I say, I really missed the laying on of hands here. Makes me a little sad because I do like holding my patients' hands and talk to them, but during COVID, I can't hold their hands yet anyway. But so we do, we do adjust a little bit to what we need to do.
Ami, I've used a digital stethoscope, but I didn't know what those noises were. Don't tell me.
You've used
a little north of the diaphragm, it's not your area, but
this is a surgeon to cardiologist joke. I could do the nephrology, like I put it somewhere on the back and listen to the kidney. Okay. Great question.
If I could say, it's also the use. So don't look at telemedicine, whether you're here listening from a hospital or a startup, but it's probably more towards the hospitals. Don't look at it as a linear identical or digitized equivalent of the inpatient experience. You absolutely can see more patients daily as a provider. And the kicker is, how do you use it strategically? Concrete example, I'll give you 2. One, let's say you're doing you're an ortho practice. And you may say, ortho might not normally be conducive to telemedicine, but you need to do post-op follow-up, right? And so you're going to do that as a clinic day. You're going to make the patient have someone else drive her to the clinic and back, right? It's an inconvenience to the patient, and it's going to gobble up some of the surgeon's time and maybe their PA. Instead, you could do those follow-up visits virtually, have the patient ambulate back and forth, look at the site of surgery to see if it's red and angry, and if everything's fine, stay home. Knock out probably twice as many, if not 3 times as many consults in a single day, freeing the surgeon up to cut open more people and make more money, if that's what the ortho wants to care about, right? I'm just being from a naked business play. A different one, let's say use asynchronous, or even if you're doing video chat, when you would normally do a live interactive intake of the questions you would ask the patient with a clinical decision tree, you can digitize much of that. So let's say your normal patient consult time is 20 minutes end to end. If you had the patient take her own time, not getting white coat syndrome, just being calm and deliberative, really thinking about the symptoms, et cetera. Spend 20 minutes of her own time completing the online medical intake process. The physician takes a look at the answers, sees what the clinical decision support software may flag as some other follow-up questions, comes into that prepared, as opposed to, oh, let me take a look at the chart, knock on the door and walk in, right? You have taken a 30-minute or 20-minute experience and winnowed it down to maybe only 10 minutes of physician time, thereby allowing the doctor, she can do triple the amount of consults, even if they're all video. And I'm not talking about like DTC asynchronous, $5 a pop. So there really are very powerful ways that you can increase throughput and capacity, or just give doctors more time to like breathe and like be a normal person and minimize burnout.
Yeah, letting doctors be a normal person is like a very far stretch from what we do, but decreasing burnout is true. The other thing you said is a great point, though, calm and deliberate. Our patients are so frazzled when they come into the hospital, just driving into the city, getting upstairs, sitting in a blue gown. It's too cold, it's too hot. I met 17 people. I didn't catch half their names before I saw my doctor. And then you're asking them to do things like patient-reported outcomes, which actually are extraordinarily useful in helping manage patients in direct care. To be able to do that in the comfort of your own home, Nate, you're totally right. The kind of information we get from the patient is that much more helpful in managing them.
So many great answers, so many great questions from the audience. We do have just 2 more questions that I want to, because they're very interesting, so I want to get to them. So Dave Brown, thank you for joining us again. We really appreciate your following. Is telemedicine accelerating the adoption of automated medicine, meaning delivered by artificial intelligence or some clinical decision support? Ooh, this is a complicated question.
Let's do Andrew, Nate, and then I'll make a comment because I think.
Ooh, okay.
I just want to highlight that Nate described surgery as cut up. So nice, or cut open. Nice lawyer comment there. Yes, I do. I do think that telemedicine is leading us to more automated medicine. And speaking to some of my colleagues from the ATA board, Christopher Northern being one, and some others, we were discussing in some of the work that others have done where they're using chatbots in front of telemedicine. So chatbots and triage can go to remote monitoring, and remote monitoring can then lead to live video visits. And the point of this is you're trying to scale commoditized medicine. You don't want to constantly have video because it's one-to-one. And so automated medicine can help guide and direct you so that the interaction you have is meaningful and also appropriate, in many ways safer, because if you're getting more information from home, it can be better. I know time is short, so I'll leave it at that, but I just think we've scratched the surface of this. And I would just ask that rhetorical question, what will a cell phone look like in 3 years? We have no idea, but it'll be a lot different.
Yeah, I mean, the answer to Dave's question is yes, resounding yes. DTC asynchronous, for example, that's just a step towards automated AI. CDS really is just an in-between. Okay, the physician, she takes a look at the patient in person, thinks about it independently. Okay, that's like one end of the spectrum. And you get CDS and eventually AI. FDA has software as a medical device as a category. They have been approved some entirely independent AI diagnostic tools already, like for diabetic retinopathy. They have digital therapeutics like adolescent ADD apps and gamification. It's going to be there, and eventually will be like Terminator days with Skynet and the robot overlords doing everything. It's not ready yet. The hype and the promise is not ready because there's inherent racial bias and ethnic bias. Most of the programmers are a bunch of guys who look like me and sitting in rooms in Silicon Valley. And as a result, that's some of the input out. But the output is only as good as the data set input. So we will get there, but not in the next couple of years, I believe.
Yeah, I think we're starting to get there slowly. I think there are small segments where we're getting really good. Radiology has been doing this for long before we have, as some of our prior guests have shared with us, right? The ability to tell a pneumonia in a chest x-ray from not. And so I think there's some smaller areas where this is going to take off before it takes off broadly. One of the things we brought up in our past shows is also, when we say automated medicine, we're not saying somebody's going to decide your care for you. We're saying some of the basic things that we are going through one at a time are instead going to come to us in larger volumes and are going to be tagged or triggered. So every Monday, I get blood pressure readings in my coarctation of the aorta patients, and I get 100 blood pressure readings or 65 blood pressure reasons, but they are tagged because I have preset what's high for which patient. And therefore, I'm immediately able to say, okay, I'm going to call these 4 back today. My nurse calls them, we follow up what's happening. And so it really is, it's kind of like a trigger, and it takes away, it both adds something I wasn't getting because I didn't have, like Dr. Watson was talking about, chronic disease management. We didn't know what it really could look like until telemedicine because we were doing interval. And now instead of doing interval care, we're doing chronic care. We really are doing it chronically. But I think it takes away a lot of the burden of the volume of data that can be generated in the medical field today. And it's that burden that is leading to what Nate pointed out, which is, burnout in physicians and nurses, because all of that volume is just too much for the human mind to process and to do it safely with high quality. At some point, it's going to be too much. So you do need these systems that are automated that say, let me deliver this safely to you to this point. And now please use your years of intellectual capacity to be able to decide what comes next. So you're right, Dave. This is a great question, and it is going to accelerate that process in a lot of different areas.
So all great answers, all great questions. We're going to end the show with a question from Ashvin Pillai. Thank you so much. It's a great question, a little bit of a touchy question. And something that doctors have been concerned about for a while. And this will be the first time I actually have a conversation with a lawyer in the room as well. I don't know what he's going to say. So I don't know how we compare. But we'll find out. Okay. What are the new legal implications that telemedicine has brought along with it?
Nate.
Is that where Andrew's going to take? Okay.
Andrew probably has Dr. Watson probably has some things to say about this.
I'll be brief. It's how do we understand establishing the physician-patient relationship is critical as one of the main ones, because you cannot prescribe and treat without that relationship being established. And another one that's being challenged, as Nate brought up, is this whole implication of practicing across state lines. And you're getting into interstate commerce and national driver's license, and it's just, it's not there, but it's topics like that are relevant. And there's a lot of nuances for telemedicine, like originating sites and the intervals between billing and locations for billing. And Nate truly is an expert, and I have the highest regard for him. But as a physician, we're seeing this pop up.
Ashvin is a young doctor who follows us in India. So I think the special consideration of the 50 states in the United States, I don't know if it's strange, but it's definitely complicating things for delivering telemedicine. Sorry, go ahead, Nate.
Andrew, as always, distilled it to the most important single issue, which is how to digitize the essential elements of the doctor-patient relationship. Okay, not to get into like legal philosophy, but law is a bridge from where our society is to where we want to be. Okay, and it's designed to move us forward in the direction that we collectively want. So these state telemedicine laws and rules, or FSMB guidelines, or all these ATA publications, right? They're intended to give you steps along the way. They're not intended to try to be like, oh, let me find loopholes to them and navigate. There's always going to be folks who are trying to get an edge that way. But if you look at it in that sense, or if you, Dr. Pillai, if you ever encounter a virtual care situation where you're like, I'm not sure what to do, take a step back and say, well, what would I do in person? And then how can I digitize those important elements, right? And that's going to be your answer. The other part about the legal implications is, it's 50 states, 50 different laws. And more importantly, the fluidity and the ease of e-commerce and product design can actually make otherwise like illegal kickbacks and referral patterns and vertical integration and end-to-end and full stack. All these things are really enjoyable from a consumer perspective. They're highly problematic because healthcare is the second most regulated industry in the U.S., second to the Department of Defense. So what it can do for some folks, entrepreneurs who are ambitious but not informed about these rules, is they can build models that are huge successes. Like, oh, we got all this great user growth because they're breaking the rules, either deliberately or not. And I likened it to if you're the banker at Monopoly and you're slipping yourself a bunch of those extra orange 500s, of course you're going to win the game, right? Of course you will, right? So I think it's like an obligation.
How do you play Monopoly? Okay.
Hey, Nate, do you want to
Right.
talk about that?
Yeah, just to be responsible with it. And what entrepreneurs should know is there are solutions that are legally compliant. They meet the fraud and abuse rules. They're scalable and they're patient focused. So then use those, and then all you have to do is focus on delivering an excellent clinical product, and B, like marketing or promoting the heck out of it. And it will yield success, not just to you as the entrepreneur, but for your patients. These are not bottles of water. These are not Fortnite dances or costumes or widgets that you're selling. These are people. And I think that's important to keep in mind.
That's fantastic advice. Lacey agrees. Yeah, fantastic advice, Nate. I love that, especially for the entrepreneurs. I think one thing that we think about in delivering this kind of care is also who's going to control that. And you talked a little bit about it, and we touched upon it when we talked about the FDA, et cetera. But I think Congress here, we have a great conversation coming up with two of my colleagues, one from Brazil and one from Spain. And they face similar problems, which is at the national level, where do those laws come from? How are we going to decide what is good or not? And I think one other issue in this country is going to be the use of telephone. Now, we think a lot about the use of video. We talk about the use of remote patient monitoring. And somehow people have this idea that there's a hierarchy. Video's the best, then there's telephone, then there's remote monitoring, then there's texting. And I will tell you that in some communities and for some diseases, texting will provide higher quality, safer, better care than video ever could. And so I think one thing we do need to do is get rid of that hierarchy, because if that translates to a legal hierarchy, we're going to be in a little bit of trouble.
So I think this was a fantastic discussion. I really appreciate our guests for joining us, our audience for joining us. Maybe we can have our guests just give last remarks and remind our audience who you are, where to find you on social media or otherwise, and then Ami can close out. Thanks for joining to our audience. Maybe Dr. Watson.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jen and Ami, as always, and grateful for your support and all of your leadership in this wonderful series that you've put together. And it's always an honor to be on these events, and certainly with the wonderful Nate Lacktman, even though the cut open cut me deep. And you can find me on Telemed now. I stick to Twitter, and it's just a real pleasure to be here. And I would just like to say, I just don't think we have begun to understand the full ramifications of taking healthcare back to the homes. I think the biggest thing I'm seeing as a physician is I don't know what the point of care is, not why we do it. I don't know where it takes place anymore. And it's going to take us a long time to understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, Ami and Jen, thank you for putting this together to continue to share the information and encourage people with confidence that they can look at the way healthcare is delivered and change it for the better. It's a pleasure to be here. You can check out my information, foley.com/and Lacktman or at Lacktman on Twitter. Smash that like button, follow MedTech Insights, and join us next week.
I like how Nate's going to join us next week as well.
I'm going to be in the audience. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both. It is, first of all, such an honor to always have the opportunity to spend time with you, to talk with you, to tweet with you. I learn every time we interact together. So really, really honored to have both of you on the show today. And thank you for spending the time with us and our audience. Thank you to our audience. I will say next week, we're going to delve a little deeper. For those of you who are interested in the AI, we're going to have Kim Shaw with us, who does some AI VR work, is CEO of that company. And we're also going to have Evan Kierstel with us to talk a little bit more about telemedicine and dive in, who's also one of our #TeleMedNow friends. So excited to continue this conversation. Thank you, the audience, for joining us every Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern. And Dr. Joe, I will leave you with the last word.
Really appreciate the audience and your interaction and your following and the amazing guest. I heard so much about you and haven't actually read the chapter that you contributed to the book, but very excited about the book. And thank you to the audience member joining us next Tuesday at 12 noon. Thanks, everyone.